Hello, old bull here. Today's one of those days. Heavy sky, comforting silence, and that smell of old leather here in the tack shop mixing with the aroma of coffee brewing over the camp stove. Nothing fancy, just an old kettle and boiling water rising slowly like it's thinking about life too. Meanwhile, I light my pipe, that Boswell that's been with me for years, and let the smoke dance in the air, blending with my thoughts. There's no rush here, just me, the sound of the wind outside, and time that insists on passing slowly. You know, I like to make my coffee this way. My way, no frills. Folks have told me I do it all wrong, that there's a right method, the exact measurement, this and that. But you know what? I do it my way, because it brings me pleasure, because it reminds me of who I am. Being a man isn't about following recipes. It's about knowing what truly feeds your soul. And in this rustic little corner, between leather and dust, I find more answers than most books out there. Sometimes just making the coffee is an act of resistance in itself. I always say, you want to know what it means to be a real man? Start by making something with your own hands, even if it's just strong, wrong coffee. It's not about the perfection of espresso. It's about the steadiness of the man holding the kettle. Between one sip and the next, I'll tell you about my latest trip, which started on a long road and ended with cold, rain, and a whole lot of reflection. There's something hardly anyone tells you. It's not age that weakens a man. It's the silence he agrees to live with. It's not time that steals your courage. It's the complacency that walks right into your living room, sits on your couch, and helps itself to your coffee like it has the right. The raw truth? You could be 20 or over 70, but the old man comes in when you let him, when you go quiet, when you pull away, when you forget who you were made to be. Maybe you're sitting there now, in a moment where everything feels stuck, dry, colorless. You catch yourself wondering if this is the life you were meant to live, or if there's still something more. And you know what? There is, but it doesn't come easy. It takes a kind of strength you only learn through experience. It comes from an inner fire, that voice that says, yeah, get up. It's not over yet. This video is for those who haven't given up on themselves, or for those who need to be reminded that there's still time to fight. Here, you won't hear sweet promises. You'll hear the truth. You'll face reflections that might sting. But you'll also find a path, a calling, a memory of who you were and who you can still become. It's not about becoming young again. It's about not letting the old man in. You know, some folks think that sitting still, drinking coffee, and staring at nothing is for people who've lost their way. But let me tell you a secret. Sometimes a man needs to sit in silence just to hear the noise within. It's there, between the cigar smoke and the scent of fresh coffee, that a lot of things fall back into place. Life doesn't shout answers. It whispers to those who have the courage to be quiet for a few minutes. This habit of slow thinking isn't escapism. It's discipline. The world is full of noise, urgency, people running without knowing where. But the real man, the true man, learns to stop before continuing. He gives himself that time, and in that time, he reflects on his responsibility as a husband, as a father, as a provider. It's there, in that pause, between a hot sip and a slow drag, that he reconnects with his purpose. And it's funny how this kind of solitude scares people When you're alone and quiet, it looks like you're broken, like you're lost. But truth is, it's in that silence that you rebuild yourself. I've been called strange for liking it this way, but let them talk. While many lose themselves trying to seem busy, I find myself in peace. And it was in one of those moments that I started piecing together the memories of my latest journey. That last journey began the way good stories often do, with improvisation and a whole lot of road ahead. I left home and drove 1,000 miles to my daughter's wedding out in Kentucky. One of those moments that make you think about legacy, you know? Seeing your little girl, now a grown woman, starting her own family, it gets you choked up. Not out of sadness, but a mix of pride, longing, and that sense of mission accomplished that only a real father understands. But a road didn't end there. After the ceremony, I turned around and went back to tending the horses, the simple life, the things that ground me in this world. I barely had time to shake the dust off my boots before heading out again. 9 hours driving to the Salmon River in Idaho, this time with my sons. 3 generations on the move, the grandfather I've become, the fathers they're becoming, and the stories we've yet to create. Brotherhood in blood and in spirit. Traveling like that isn't just about the destination. It's about what happens between the curves in the road. It's about what you say, and sometimes what you don't, with the one riding beside you. The radio might play a tune, but what really sticks is the sound of the truck shifting gears, the smell of leather and rust, the shared silence between men who respect each other. And when we reached that river, everything that followed felt like an old-school test of manhood. Crossing that river wasn't just a logistical detail. It was nearly a baptism. There was no bridge, no shortcut. Just us, the horses, the mules, and that jet boat that looked way too small for that much weight and responsibility. We stripped the saddles, stacked the tack, and called over the radio. On the other side, there was nothing but silence, except for the roar of the water. The kind of moment when a real man has to trust more in the calm of his spirit than in the steadiness of the ground. The animals knew something was coming. The mules were reluctant. The horses hesitated, tied in halters. They seemed to stare at the water like they were looking into a mirror of the unknown. But when the boat pulled back and they were already mid-river, there was no turning back. We let go of the ropes, and it was every animal for itself, wide-eyed, but they swam. Because after a certain point you either cross or you sink. That's true for us too. Every man carries moments where he must commit fully. On a sandbank we ran to grab the reins, like holding on to a piece of ourselves. Each animal was soaked, dried by hand, tied to trees. It was almost ritualistic. Dry, calm, prepare. The smell of wet fur mixed with the cold mountain breeze had a way of reminding you what it means to be a cowboy, a man who, even tired, still has the discipline to care for those who depend on him. And look, the journey hadn't even begun yet. Setting up camp after a day like that is a special kind of exhaustion. It's when your body screams for rest, but responsibility whispers louder. First, we tied to stock, fed them, found a spot to fetch water. The wind cut through skin like a sharp blade, and the sky was getting dark fast. As I snapped dry branches to build a fire, I felt the weight of the simple life, the one that doesn't forgive laziness but rewards you with purpose. Lighting the fire wasn't just heat, it was victory. The wood cracked and spat sparks like it was celebrating another day conquered. The meal was simple, the coffee strong, and the silence among men was respected like a prayer. When I unrolled my bedroll, I felt a hard ground under my back and a threat of rain in the air. But what really got to me was the bear tracks nearby, fresh prints in the dirt, reminders that the forest has its owners too. A good man learns to coexist with fear without kneeling to it, and then the rain came. Not a dramatic storm, but that steady kind of drizzle that soaks you slowly. Lying in my bedroll, the smell of leather tobacco and wet earth blended with the sound of a wind. There were no walls, just a tarp, my knife, my faith, and a certainty that the cold of the night teaches more than any book. But like every good man's story, it started with fire and would end in silence, and that was just the eve of another lesson. The next day promised more. Waking up out in the bush with a sore body, a cold face, and dew-wet beard is an experience that separates the man who complains from the man who endures. I got up from the bedroll with my knees cracking, the sky still dark, and the wind biting like winter. First mission was to get those boots on, cold and stiff like an old mistake, and drag myself to the fire pit from the night before. Reigniting the fire in times like these is more than survival. It's reclaiming control over the morning, even if you're tired, even if you're broken. The smoke rises, thick, dancing between the trees, and the smell of coffee begins to make the sacrifice feel worth it. Standing there, warming your hands around the mug, looking at a world still half asleep, has a taste that's hard to describe. No alarms, no traffic, no city noise. Just a breath of the earth, the crack of branches, the call of responsibility. That's being a real man. That's carrying the weight of the day before it even begins. As the sun fights to rise through the branches, the mind's already turning over the day's tasks, feeding the stock, reinforcing the shelter, fetching more firewood. No luxury, no comfort, just the dignity of someone who gets up even when he doesn't want to and does what needs to be done. That's where the essence of quiet strength lives, the difference between those who keep complaining and those who keep moving. But that cold morning, it was still just the beginning. The silence that followed carried more than just the chill. It carried a question that shakes any man who still has fire in his chest. I stayed there, sitting by the fire, just me and the crackle of damp wood. The boys had gone up the trail on horseback, chasing some new view, or simply the pleasure of riding. I chose to stay. Not every silence needs to be filled. Sometimes it's in silence that you hear the loudest. I fed the fire like you feed the heart, one piece at a time, no rush. There, alone, surrounded by solitude, wind, and mountains, I felt small, but whole. While the heat of the campfire wrestled with the mountain wind, I got to thinking about everything I've done, everything I didn't do, and everything I might never do. It's a practice that seems useless to the outside world, but it strengthens the spirit of an older man who refuses to become a shadow of himself. Our mind is like a barn. Either you clean and organize it, or it gets full of rats and mold. Sitting there, feeding the fire and drinking strong coffee, I was doing some inner housekeeping. And it was in that silence that the question came, without ceremony. Why do I still do this? Why still sleep on the ground, face the rain, chop wood, deal with fear and exhaustion? It wasn't for ego or for show. It was something else. Something that lives deep, where words can't reach. And while I was trying to answer that question, the wind carried an old refrain, whispering in my ear, a reminder I couldn't ignore. The voice in that cold breeze was Toby Keith's, singing softly in the back of my memory. Don't let the old man in. That line stuck to me like a coal on a wool blanket. I knew it wasn't just a song, it was a warning. We age on the outside because that's nature, but letting the old man in on the inside, that's a choice. And that's where a lot of men get lost. It's not age that brings them down. It's the abandonment of adventure, the shutting off of the fire that once moved them. Some men have never felt that calling, never climbed a hill just for the joy of the view, never stood with soaked boots on a trail just to watch the sunrise. Maybe no one ever taught them to chase that. Or maybe fear just shouted louder. Others did feel it, lived it, but slowly let it go. One day it was the comfort of the couch. The next it was a sore knee. And before they realized it, they were alive on the outside, but empty within. I also remembered a poem that hits like a hammer of truth. Do not go gentle into that good night. Don't fade quietly into the evening. Don't take old age as an invitation to give up. We're not just a body that weakens. We're a flame. And as long as there's fire, even just a coal, it's still enough to warm a cold night. And there, sitting alone in the wilderness, pipe in hand and a heart full of questions, I started to understand what keeps me moving. What is adventure, really? I'm not talking about skydiving or climbing with neon ropes. Adventure, to me, is simpler and much deeper. It's being in a place where you don't control everything, where the cold shows up uninvited, where the sounds of the night remind you the world is bigger than you. Adventure is facing the unexpected, the unknown. It's testing the strength of your masculine character when the ground sinks beneath your own steps. Some folks think being a real man means always being calm, always strong, always in control. But the truth is, a real man feels fear. He just doesn't let it own him. He faces it, even with trembling hands, and keeps going. Mature masculinity isn't born from comfort. It's forged in discomfort, in the cold of the woods, in the absence of signal, in the silence that forces you to hear your own soul. That's where you find your identity. And that's where the 4 elements every older man should seek come in: boredom, fear, unpredictability, and discomfort. Yeah, boredom, because silence teaches you how to see. Fear, because it shows you how far you're willing to go. Unpredictability, because living is adapting. And discomfort, because your body needs to remember it's still alive. When those 4 meet under a frosty camp, you don't leave the same man who arrived. Let me tell you something that's not easy to admit. I'm afraid of heights. Yeah, this old man here, who's trekked through jungles, climbed mountains, tamed wild horses, and weathered storms, still gets a lump in his throat when walking narrow trails on the edge of a mountain with the abyss right beside. But you know why I keep going? Because being a strong man isn't about having no fear. It's about having fear and going anyway. It's keeping your step firm even when the ground disappears. Fear is our greatest teacher and the most honest one. It points exactly to where your masculinity is asleep, where your courage needs to wake up. When you avoid everything that scares you, you also avoid growth. You sabotage yourself, shrink down, and slowly stop being the warrior you were born to be. A Christian man, a provider, a protector. He feels fear, yes, but he turns that fear into movement, into faith, into strength, and it's in discomfort that masculine identity is forged. In narrow turns, steep trails, the creak of the saddle while the horse hesitates before the cliff. It's not pretty, it's not easy, but it's there that you find that inner fire that had dimmed. Because I'll tell you one thing, fear only wins when you stop walking. And as you'll see next, stopping can be far more dangerous than going forward with fear. The problem with many men today isn't fear. It's the habit of avoiding everything that pushes them out of their comfort zone. When you live dodging what challenges you, you start building without realizing a routine that's too comfortable, a padded prison. And you know what that becomes? A rut, a grave with both ends open. You're still breathing, but you stop living like a real man. These holes disguised as comfort steal your strength of character, leave you worn down inside, and you don't even notice. One day you wake up feeling the weight of loneliness, of apathy, and that fire you used to have is just cold ash in your chest. You start pushing life on autopilot, like your only job now is to wait for time to pass. When in truth, you're still the provider, the protector, the example others need to see, get back up. And the most dangerous part of all this? The world claps for it. They offer distractions, conveniences, vices disguised as relief. But deep down, you know you're lost. You know you need to climb out of that hole and start carrying the weight you were made to bear. And that starts when you choose every single day to face challenges head on, even if the next trail isn't clearly marked yet. And speaking of trails, let me tell you about two kinds of camps I saw on that last journey. On the last trip, we camped in a rough spot, right by the river, over a bed of coarse gravel. The fire was low, the cold was high, and the strong coffee was the only thing keeping spirits up. A bit farther out, some guys showed up in a jet boat and pitched one of those big tents with a wood stove, cot beds, the whole setup. Nothing against it. Everyone has their own way of handling life. But when they walked past our fire and saw my bedroll covered in frost, the older guy looked and said, "Man, you're tougher than us." I just smiled and thought, I'm glad I am, because that wasn't just about camping. It was about resilience, masculinity, and quiet pride, about keeping the flame of manhood lit, even when the body feels time passing. A real man isn't measured just by what he carries on his back, but by what he endures in silence, by the cold he takes without complaint, by the wood he gathers even when the wind cuts. That kind of choice defines your identity more than any speech ever could. And listen, there's nothing wrong with wanting comfort. One day we might end up with a bigger tent, a stove inside, maybe even a cot to sleep off the ground. But it's different when that comes from wisdom, not cowardice. A man's strength isn't in rejecting comfort. It's in not depending on it to keep being strong, present, useful. And with that thought, on that freezing morning, I got up, even with a tired body, to load the gear for the day with my son Ben, waking up early in a freezing camp, beard wet with dew, fingers stiff from the cold. That takes more than courage. It takes legacy. And this time, I had the privilege of seeing my son Ben get up before me, light the fire, make the coffee, and keep the flame going while I was still wrestling with my boots. That, to me, is true inheritance. There's nothing more beautiful than watching a young man take on responsibility naturally, with that provider instinct already rising in his chest, even if he doesn't realize it yet. And I'm not speaking just as a father. I speak as an older man who knows the value of staying capable. Even with bones that ache a little more, I still take pride in throwing the saddle on the horse, carrying heavy gear, and walking miles on the horse trail, breathing in that cold mountain air. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about reminding yourself every single day that you can still be useful, still be strong, still show up for your people. That's manhood in its purest form. And even when the time comes when your strength starts to fade, what stays is the living memory that you passed on everything that mattered. Seeing my son set up camp like I did for years is like watching a fire catch from kindling you chose and stacked with care. And while he tends the fire, I sit nearby, not as someone who's stopping, but as someone who's observing and preparing. Because time might move on, but the next trail is already just ahead. It's funny. We don't realize when we start giving up. It's not all at once. It's bit by bit. One day you think it's too cold to go out. The next your coffee's cold before you get up. And suddenly it's been 5 years since the last time you did something that made you feel alive. And when you notice you just can't anymore, the body doesn't respond. The will turns into a sigh. And what started as a little rest turned into a silent routine of regrets. Many good men, fathers, husbands, grandfathers, end up in that place without even knowing what happened. They stopped doing what kept the warrior's flame alive. And I'm not talking about bravado or adrenaline. I'm talking about the kind of adventure that renews the soul, that chill in your gut that reminds you you're still alive. When we surrender to comfort, thinking it's just for now, we accidentally take a step toward a place you don't come back from, the place where you survive but no longer live. And I keep wondering, how many strong men who once carried firewood on their backs now carry only memories too heavy for their chest? How many weathered men who once fished, hunted, walked miles with soaked boots now just sit and watch through a window, empty eyes, heart burning in silence? Yeah, and that's why, before it's too late, it's worth taking a different step, even if it's small. Because just ahead is your next chance to start over. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, but I don't have a horse. I don't live near the mountains. I don't have a rifle or a trail or even a backpack. That's fine. That's no excuse. Being a real man was never about the setting. It's about the spirit. If you live in the city, find a state park, a patch of woods, any place where you can smell the wet earth, light a fire, listen to the silence. And if you can't do that yet, then plan it. Get organized. Because a man with purpose finds a way, not an excuse. Want a simple example? Grab a blanket, a bottle of water, a good book, like Walden by Thoreau, and spend a night outside by yourself in your backyard, on the porch, even in the garage. I'm serious. One night under the sky is a start. It's a symbolic gesture that says, I'm still here. There's still life inside this tired chest. Then you do it again and again. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll be back on the road, knife on your belt, soul at peace, fire lit from within. Many think they need some grand act to feel like a man again. But sometimes all you need is one small intentional decision that brings you closer to the man you used to be, or the man you can still become. You don't need a forest to find yourself. You need the courage to take that first step, because the real journey starts inside, and it's happening right now. With time, the body starts speaking louder. Knees crack. Breathing gets heavier. The warmth of the fireplace begins to sound better than the chill of the night air. But that doesn't mean you have to stop. It just means it's time to adjust your pace. If you used to run, now you walk. If you used to sleep on the ground, now maybe you use a cot. The point isn't to keep your youth. It's to keep your will to live. An older man doesn't lose his worth when he changes his rhythm. He reaffirms his discipline and wisdom by respecting his own limits. And look, that's not surrender. That's being smart. That's doing what it takes to keep moving, even if it's slower. Trading the saddle for a driver's seat when you have to, but still driving somewhere that reminds you of who you are. True masculinity isn't in how fast you climb the mountain. It's in keeping on climbing even when your feet hurt. Being a strong man isn't about being invincible. It's about being consistent, present, determined. It's about not giving in easily. Plenty will say it's better to just stay home. And maybe it is, for those who've given up on living. But if you're still here, still listening, it's because there's fuel left in your tank. There's still purpose. There's still work to be done. And even with these bones aching and this weight on your shoulders, you know, the old man hasn't come in yet. And as long as he hasn't, the road still calls. Don't let the old man in. Listen closely. Your inner man doesn't have an expiration date. He only weakens when you stop listening to his voice. When you choose the couch over the wild, the noise of television over reflection around a fire, the easy way instead of the fight. But even then, he's still there, maybe buried under bills, body aches, scars on your soul. But he's not dead. He's just waiting for a signal from you, a spark to reignite the ember that still burns. A man's life was meant to be lived whole, not halfway, not in chapters, whole. And that means falling, rising, failing again, learning, retracing your steps, getting lost, and finding your way back. Just because you're past 50 doesn't mean the trail's over. What's over is a breath of youth. But what begins is the quiet strength of maturity. The kind that doesn't yell but stays. The kind that, even on its knees, still prays, still fights, still protects. The truth, my friend, is that masculinity doesn't expire. It molds, it transforms, but it never gives up. You are made to leave a legacy, not just a photo album. And the time you still have, no matter how little it may seem, is your gift to yourself and to the ones who love you. Get up, square your shoulders, take the next step, because the road isn't over yet, and just up ahead, a new journey is waiting. There's something I started doing more as the years passed, and it's helped me clear my mind a whole lot. Writing. Nothing fancy, nothing serious, just jotting down thoughts, putting my ideas on paper. Some days it's just a single line, other days a whole river of words. But every time I write, it's like the voices inside me settle into place, organizing what I think helps me understand what I feel. And for a man who carries the world on his back, that's no small thing. Writing has become my way of talking to myself when the world outside is too loud. When the world's rushing me, I answer with silence and a notebook. You don't have to write pretty or proper. Just write honestly. You can start with a simple question. What's hurting me today? Or why am I still fighting? Simple questions. But they open doors we didn't even know were locked. If you're one of those men who stays quiet, who swallows tears, who has no one to share the load with, try this. Sit in a corner, grab a piece of paper, and write to yourself. You don't have to show it to anyone, but write. Let it out. Because sometimes before we can talk to the world, we have to relearn how to talk to our own soul. And trust me, that simple habit can clear the path for a whole lot of good that's still ahead. Well, that's it for today. I just wanted to share this moment with you and leave this conversation floating in the air like a good echo at the end of the day. Sometimes all we need is someone to say, hey, I'm still here too, standing, despite it all. And if this video reminded you of that you're still standing, still breathing, still carrying that flame inside, then every word that came out of my mouth was worth it. Be logical, sure. Be cautious, yes. But for the love of the good Lord, don't be lukewarm. Don't live like someone who's already given up. Don't let comfort kill your courage or routine swallow your faith. A real man doesn't need to shout to be strong. Sometimes he just needs to stay silent, but moving, one step at a time, one day at a time. Because that's the trail of someone who has purpose, responsibility, and still believes the journey is worth it. And if by chance you feel like the old man is trying to come in, lock the door, light the fire, and remember who you are. You weren't born to live half a life or to put off the part that matters most. So go ahead. Live it all in your own way, at your own pace. But live it whole. Don't let the old man in. And now that the smoke from this conversation is fading into the air, tell me, when was the last time you felt your heart beat strong for something that pulled you out of your routine? When was the last time you looked in the mirror and saw a whole man, tired, maybe wounded, but still steady in his purpose? Life won't slow down to wait for you to decide, and it won't spare you just because you're tired, but it still respects those who choose to stand, even with fear, even with pain. So answer me in the comments. What are you putting off out of fear, comfort, or habit? What old man have you let in your mind and needs to be kicked out today? Because one thing I'll guarantee you, brother, a full life isn't for those who just sit back and watch. It's for those who stand up, even if they're staggering, and say, I'm still here. If this talk lit any kind of flame inside you, even a small one, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking this road with me. Because as long as we can breathe, walk, and think, the fight isn't over, and this fight is worth it.